And now we are still doing 30 miles an hour, but we're only burning 19 gallons per hour now between both engines. And that is really good for a boat of this size. You can use these tips to get better fuel economy on any boat. The tricks you are about to learn will work on almost any boat with any style of engine except for straight drive inboard boats. But you will need to know about a few factors that will affect the outcome of how much fuel economy you can save. There are 4 major factors to how fast a boat can go and how much fuel it is going to burn to achieve that speed. Those factors are the engine, the propeller, the weight of the boat, and the design of the hull. The engine isn't just factored in by how much horsepower it has, but more about where the engine is mounted. The mounting height of the engine determines how much of the engine is in the water, and for outboards, the more of the lower unit that is in the water, the more drag it creates, which slows you down and burns more fuel. Then for the propeller, the style, pitch, how many blades are on the prop, and the size of the propeller are all going to weigh in on this drag factor, which affects the amount of fuel that you are going to burn. We already have detailed videos that describe how to determine the correct engine mounting height, as well as what it means to prop out a boat and how to determine if your boat is running the correct propeller and how you can tell. I'll put a link to them in the description and at the end of this video so you can watch those videos next. Having the engine mounted correctly and propped out, the next factor is the weight that you are carrying in the boat. The heavier a boat is, the deeper it will sit in the water, which means that it will have more drag and consume more fuel to go faster. You want to think more about everything that you put into the boat. You know, how many people, how much gear, fishing poles, bait, full live wells, coolers, ice, and then the freshwater tanks being full of water, as well as how much fuel is in the fuel tank. All of this makes a huge difference in the fuel consumption, and there are even a lot of people that actually regulate their fuel that they carry just to lighten their load. Like if they know they are only going on a sunset cruise that only takes 5 gallons of fuel to do, then they will generally only keep 10 or 15 gallons of fuel in the tank. This makes the boat a lot lighter than having a completely full fuel tank of say 75 or 100 gallons of fuel. Now, we're not advocating that you run your engine on an empty tank all the time. Just be mindful of your boat, your fuel tank, and where that sweet spot is for you and how you use your boat. The last factor is the design of the boat's hull. There are many different styles of boats, but you have basically 2 main types. There are displacement hulls and planing hulls. Displacement hulls don't really ever plane out per se, where a planing hull does. They just push through the water, displacing the water. Whereas say a pontoon boat, a deck boat, or a deep V, or any other style of hull that runs up out of the water and basically rides on a certain percentage of the hull on top of the water, this type of hull will have the least amount of drag as possible. This is the optimal position to get the best amount of fuel economy. Really quick on planing hulls though, every boat has what is called a planing speed. That is the point at which the boat speed and RPMs of the engine get down to a point where the boat falls off of that plane. Every boat is different, but most are somewhere around 3,000 RPMs and 10 to 15 miles per hour. When you hit it, you'll be able to feel the back end of the boat sink down into the water, and you'll notice the clear, clean spots of water flowing on each side of the boat will disappear as well. That is the planing speed of the hull, and somewhere between that and wide open throttle, you will have your boat's cruising speed. The cruising speed of the boat will also change depending on all the variables that we have already talked about. I would say that the cruising speed of a boat would be defined as the maximum speed that a boat can travel while burning the optimal amount of fuel possible. Most boats these days have a speed of around 25 or so knots, or somewhere around 30 miles per hour for their cruising speed. Though newer boats are now having a cruising speed of around 40 miles per hour and even higher in some cases, but to find your boat's cruising speed, you will need to play around with these numbers and speeds and figure out what you like the best. The trick is in the trimming and the position of the handles. When the engines or the outdrive is tucked all the way in or trimmed all the way down, it is going to have the most amount of drag and will be pushing the nose of the boat down into the water, slowing the boat down and burning more fuel. If you want to see how much fuel you are burning though, you're going to need to see your gauge. Over time, gauges can get sunburned, cracked, and just fade out so that you cannot read them anymore. That is why this week's contest prize is for anyone that has a gauge that needs to be restored, which is exactly what GaugeSaver.com does. They can take your old unreadable gauge and restore it so that you can see how much fuel you are consuming. Here we've got a 34-foot Venture with twin 300 horsepower Mercury Ferrados, and just a heads up, you'll want to click that subscribe button and get the notification bell on, because in the upcoming weeks we will be replacing these 300s with a pair of 350s, and we'll do an in-depth comparison of whether more horsepower really consumes more fuel or if you actually get better fuel economy with larger engines. So you don't want to miss that, but as it stands, this boat has a top end speed of about 46 to 47 miles per hour and burns about 29 to 30 gallons per hour per engine. Now the top end speed depends on whether the engines are trimmed up or not. With the engines trimmed all the way down, the boat only does about 43 to 44 miles per hour, but still burns the same amount of fuel. Whereas with the engines trimmed up, we gain about 3 to 4 miles per hour or more, still burning the same amount of fuel. At a speed of about 39 to 40 miles per hour, with the engines tucked all the way in, we're burning around 21 gallons per hour. Then if we trim the engines up just a little bit, we can watch the fuel consumption drop. We'll have to bring the throttles back just a little bit to keep the same speed of about 40 miles per hour, but now you'll see that the fuel consumption has dropped 3 to 4 gallons per hour without any loss of speed. Now you'll see a really drastic change in fuel consumption from wide open throttle burning 30 gallons per hour to what we burn at 35 miles per hour and then at 30 miles per hour. You might be surprised, even though we only dropped about 15 miles per hour, our fuel economy becomes fantastic for long cruises. At 35 miles an hour with the engines fully tucked, we're burning about 16 gallons an hour. Then after we trim the engines up a little bit and bring the throttles back to get back to roughly 35 miles an hour, we are now burning around 13 to 14 gallons an hour, still a swing of about 3 gallons per hour. Then at 30 miles an hour, with a little bit of trim, we're down to only burning about 10 or so gallons an hour at about 4,200 RPMs, which I would say that for this boat, we have a cruising speed of about 30 to 35 miles an hour. And to only be burning 10 gallons an hour, that is really good because this boat has a fuel capacity of 300 gallons. Which means we could essentially travel roughly 400 to 450 miles in 15 hours on only one fill-up if you really wanted to. You want to remember that the wind and the current of the water is also going to play a part, but this same technique works on all manufacturers and you can play with it to see where your boat likes to run to give you the best fuel economy possible. It may not seem like a lot, only saving 3 or 4 gallons an hour, but when you are talking about twins, that is about 8 gallons an hour, and with fuel around $3 to $4 a gallon, if you are on a long cruise, say 5 or 6 hours, that's over $100. Or say you go on a sunset cruise 3 or 4 times a week, you're talking about saving a couple $100 a month on your boat's fuel bill. Now drop a comment below and let us know what your boat's cruising speed is, and include a hashtag GaugeSaver for your chance to win if your gauges need to be restored. Make sure to click the video on your screen to make sure that you've got the right prop on your boat, and we look forward to seeing you next week.